All right, thank you all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If you're joining from wherever you are, we are really grateful to have every one of you here on this call. This is Fintech Replay 2025 is a special live stream series by the Africa Fintech Summit, where over the next few days we will take a step back to reflect on the moments that have shaped Africa's fintech ecosystem in 2025, and more importantly, what those moments in terms of signals for 2026 is going to look like. This is heavily inspired by the idea of the year in review series, not only about rankings and headlines, it's about patterns, decisions, market signals, what moved the capital markets, what moved the capital, what reshaped strategy, and what quietly changed the direction of the ecosystem. Today's conversation is focused on deals and market moves. It's a 3 day series. Tomorrow is going to be focused on product, innovation, ecosystem shifts, and the last day is going to focus on expansions and a few other areas. We'll wrap up with crystal ball moments, bringing the panelists back into the conversation on Friday. Today, we are going to be looking at how capital flowed in 2025, the partnerships and transactions that mattered, the role of consolidation, and what all this means for founders, investors, operators heading into 2026. And I'm very excited to have two of my very great friends joining this conversation today. Isaac Newton, the Managing Director of Innovation Spark and an ecosystem builder. We also have Benjamin Boachi, who is the Chief Economist at Seven Stacks. Together, they are going to bring a lot of perspective from innovation ecosystem to capital markets, the macroeconomic analysis, which will basically help us unpack what really mattered in 2025. So thank you everyone for joining us live on this YouTube and LinkedIn. Let's get the conversation started, guys. So your first words, Isaac, Ben, whoever wants to take the floor.
Well, I'll say thank you, Fossa, for the invitation. Thank you for the yeah, being here. It was great to see you in Ghana at the event. So thank you for bringing it to Accra. So from the Innovation Spark, we call ourselves ecosystem enablers. We're based in Accra, but we work across the ecosystem in Africa, Nigeria, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, working with startups, working with developing partners, and seeing what's on the ground there. It's been an interesting year. I think going from 2024 into 2025, I think we saw a lot of shifts. One of the best things I think was MoneyPoint now actually becoming a unicorn in 2024, but that showed that the rise of fintechs is still there. Of all the unicorns we have in Africa, fintechs dominate the space.
Mm,
So they are still a necessity to create the pipelines for everything. Money makes the world go round. Unless money can move, things won't happen, right?
yeah.
So it is a necessity. A lot of people are wanting the other sectors, the agri-techs, the ed-techs, and others to hit the unicorn status. But I think we still need more fintechs to really help move money seamlessly for those other sectors of the economy to grow. So I think that's where I want to start with my open submission, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. Ben?
Yeah, so it's great to see you guys. I know it's been a while. Yeah, 2025 has been a very interesting year in the capital markets on the continent. When you put it into context, we're coming out of a half decade of really strained activity in the markets. You had you had COVID, and obviously that was a massive shock that really just disrupted all kinds of activity across the globe, and it really did hit Africa quite hard. And then you had the outbreak of war in Russia and Ukraine, and that also sent a lot of inflation and food inflation rippling across the globe. So you had just a confluence of really once in a century type events that really hit the markets in 2020 and thereafter. So we've all kind of been waiting in the capital markets for signs of life, because when you had all of these issues, you had inflation across the globe just spike, and it just ripped through all of the markets. And the one thing you really don't want is inflation, because it really just damages economic activity in so many different ways. And it was really bad. And then you also had a debt crisis that also happened, because that's kind of what happens on the continent when market activity gets hampered. So there were a couple of years there that were really bad, but 2025 has been sort of the first year where we can really say we've put a lot of that struggle behind us. The markets in Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria, where we cover here at Second Stacks, they're all up, somewhere between 40 and 70%, and that's a strong year for African capital markets. So there are a lot of different drivers, just having tamed inflation in all three markets, or at least in Nigeria, you're seeing disinflation taking hold, so that's good, and currency stability, which is also another cornerstone. So you've just seen a lot of rebound and a lot of stability this year. That's really helped activity in the capital markets.
Interesting. Now, if I borrow from the reflections of Dalio on understanding what's happening, looking back and understanding the cycle of things that are repeating itself, he says history rarely moves in a straight line, and it moves in circles, driven by debt, capital, productivity, human behavior, and what feels unique in the moment often follows patterns we've seen before. And it's very clear from what you are describing, Ben, that we are seeing a cyclical effect repeat itself over the last century, and events like COVID, which resulted in a reset in the capital markets, resulted in the reset of what financing looks like. I think in one of my conversations in the beginning of the year at the Age of Africa symposium, I talked about the fifth FDI reform, right? It's just like how you've had the fourth industrial revolution. I see a fifth wave of capital reform happening in the last 5 years post COVID, where a hard reset really hit what capital means, what Africa's position in the world means, what new drivers like critical minerals, energy, data, all of that, human capital is going to mean for the next phase. As we go to you, Newton, I want to hear more about what's happening in the innovation space. What's really the stimulus that is driving activity in a certain direction? Because to every action, there's equal and opposite reaction, and the market always reacts to turn on what events triggered the hard reset in the market. 2022, great VC freeze. We saw a big drop in Africa's investment into Africa by 46% in 2023. We saw another big drop by 25% year on year in 2024. This year has been a very interesting year with massive IPOs, massive partnerships, and almost like a rebound. We've seen capital markets also rebounding. What's happening in the innovation space, and what's the correlation between that and what's happening, really happening in the markets?
Thank you for that tough question. But I think the main things are playing. As Ben was also saying, like on one hand, like Africa is looking more attractive, right? So the actual capital markets in different countries are looking stable. In Ghana, we had elections this year, and for the first time in many years, our currency has been stable, which is very different. But what we've seen as well a lot is the type of investments coming in. We have a lot more debt financing. And I think that has lots of different factors, from risk of equity, from cost of capital being cheaper, especially like in the US and Europe. So it's easy now to do some debt financing for them, for things here. Also, funders don't dilute their equity as much, right? So you see different investment structures being used. And Ghana debt financing last year grew tremendously. I think like 400% from what we had in the past. So just using Ghana as an ecosystem indicator, you can see that's a lot more interesting now for various kinds of financing, which I think is good. You still have the equity financing coming in, but also now more additional types of financing is happening.
Mm.
We still have issues of fintechs having to get regulations in each country. So I was at a conference with Finca earlier this year and talking about how, although we preach about AFTA and the single market that where the African Union will become like a single market like the EU or the European area, you still have to go into each country and deal with different regulators and have different laws in different countries. You need to get your fintech or your startup, or in this case, your fintech registered and licensed. So I think that's still slowing down the speed of growth for fintechs, especially those that are looking to scale across Africa. But then, as mentioned in my submission, you have others like MoneyPoint that are focusing this in one market and becoming unicorns. So I think that also shows there's a lot of money in single markets. Whether you're looking at just Nigeria or the Francophone market with companies like Wave, just taking care of that region, you've seen a lot of growth just in single regions or countries. So I think more investors are seeing that there is life in Africa. Going back all the way to Paystack, when Paystack sold to Stripe, that grew the wave of unicorns. After that, Flutter and the rest came about. I think investors are still seeing huge potential. So we still have strong appetite in the fintech space, which takes around 40% of all funding in the startup world.
Very interesting. So Ben, I want to come back to you. We set the tone, but before that, Isaac, would you say, based on the signals, Kelball, throwing a Kelball at you, or Kelball, whatever you want to call it, if you had to choose one word that Africa experienced this year: correction, consolidation, inquiry, repositioning, what would you choose?
So what was the last one?
Correction, consolidation, and quiet repositioning.
Foster.
Yeah.
I'll say quiet repositioning. Right. I don't think it was a correction per se. I think we're trying to go back to the funding levels we had 2022, 2023. We're going to have a end of year review coming up, so we'll see how it looks like for Ghana. But I really feel that things are happening, right? Partnerships are being formed, fintechs to fintechs, cross borders, with policy as well. So I think there's a lot of repositioning going on, companies understanding how to work in the markets. I think what's also changing is regulators getting clued on. Before, fintechs used to be like the enemy of banks, the enemy of regulators, the disruptors, and just destroying everything. And now you see a lot more regulators understanding and trying to work with fintechs. You see a lot more industry founders going into government and government agencies. I'm speaking of Ghana, but also different Nigeria, CC Hubs, Busan. So I think that the regulators are wising up and even getting industry experts to join them and see how they can shape things. We're seeing things like remittance beating FDI. So people now understand, okay, like instead of just relying on foreign development aid, how to get remittance to work better. And now also how do we use things like stable coins for remittance and reduce the fees even further so more remittance can flow in. So I see this kind of repositioning to see, okay, how can Africa work without aid? Because the aid market is slowing down. But also cross-border and working with other partners. Fintechs are now part of the solution instead of being a problem for regulators.
Very, very interesting. I think one of my most exciting things, and to contribute to the question of whether it's a consolidation, correction, or quiet repositioning, biggest controversy or conversation that has gone on in the last 2-3 years, or probably beyond that, has been intervention currencies in Africa and how it's impacting inflation and the movement of money within the continent, cost of transactions, more importantly, pegged against the USD. Perhaps since 2018 started to make inroads around solving for what intervention currency would mean in terms of FX. between markets and movement of money, goods, and services between markets. And for the first time this year, we've seen one of the biggest progress they've made between what the progress they reported in 2024 and the progress they reported in 2025, piggybacking from the reports shared during their Cowrie Summit in Lagos a few weeks ago, which we covered in one of our previous segments on the show. And I think PAPS has been quietly repositioning Africa through an infrastructure play. We've seen another quiet repositioning between partnerships between Flutter Waves and other stable coins. We've seen quiet repositioning in Africa in terms of solving for the same intervention currency using stable coins between Visa and other players. We've seen strategic investments, we've seen digital assets, bills, and policies. I think which we'll come to in the last conversation, Isaac, as we allow Ben to take the floor and talk about stress, rebalancing, and decision making. What's really forced the market to do what it did. We've seen periods of growth often carry the seed of excess. And capital, they say, is easy to encourage leverage. Confidence turns into fragility, and then eventually the system is forced to rebalance. When the great freeze happened in 2020, post 2022, after Africa experienced a 4 billion injection into the market, 2023 experienced a significant drop due to hesitation and the impact of post-COVID decisions that were made impulsively or as a result of testing the market, testing, understanding, investing in understanding rather than investing for yield. It's resulted in a lot of people hesitating because they did not realize that what they were doing was investing in repositioning rather than investing in for yield or multiples. Isaac, what in 2025 we saw capital become more selective, more strategic. Partnerships have come to replace aggressive expansion. Everybody is looking for who is the next strategic partner I can work with. We saw PayPal and Stripe come together and a few other mergers and acquisitions happening, a few strategic partnerships with Visa announcing so many of them, with MTN consolidating, Axian acquiring a few telcos to get into the mobile financial services market and launching its fintech department as well. Um, we've seen discipline return into the conversation. From your vantage point as an economist and working with Second Stack, how do you see this period of stress reshaping decisions, and how is it making founders think different, act different, investors same, and institutions same?
So for Benjamin?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so the question is how, like, from our vantage point at Second Stacks, what's the nature of founders that we're seeing?
No, how are you seeing stress shaping, or how you
Yeah,
see stress rebalance the conversation? Like in the period of stress, we've seen people's decisions and behavior changing. Investor behavior is
yeah,
changing,
yeah,
all of that stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So for the most part, you like I was mentioning earlier, if you look at the global context, there's been a lot of stress. So there's growth has been a little strained in China. Growth's been a little strained in the EU. The US is doing fairly well, but primarily off the back of AI. So in a scenario like this, a lot of investors are going to look to Africa because there is just an understanding that underlying growth on the continent is actually very robust. I mean, the fastest growing economies, largely because we're coming up off of a lower base. But as you also know, there are a lot of institutional voids here. So what you end up seeing is, especially in a year like 2025, where the capital is starting to flow, you're also going to have to see a lot of different strategies to de-risk these investments, and that's really where you start to see these partnerships that start to form, where you kind of hold hands with another innovator who's already kind of cracked a code or found a solution in a market, rather than you sort of taking your solution and thinking, I'm going to go take on that risk to try to solve a problem. So I think that's largely what's driven a lot of the partnerships that you're seeing, especially when you're looking at cross border entries. When someone's going from Nigeria into Kenya or from Ghana into another country on the continent, you start to see a lot of folks explore these partnerships rather than just setting up shop and kind of going full steam ahead.
We cannot. Thank you very much, Ben. We cannot talk about trends happening and not talk about stable coins and digital assets and how they are resetting the market aggressively. Isaac, I think you want to take a jab at this. Policy leading innovation leading policy, investments are moving towards the stablecoin direction. A lot of strategic partnerships are forging towards the same. The signals are very, very clear. What's your take on what's happening within the digital asset space in Africa from a policy, investment, innovation standpoint?
I mean, I think it's a really fantastic time. I mean, I know we talk about AI a lot, and AI is obviously a game changer. But I talk about the ABCs, right? It's AI, it's blockchain, it's compute. Compute cloud and compute power and GPUs and everything. That's kind of the fundamentals. And despite AI taking all the headlines, at least quietly in Ghana, blockchain is really moving forward. Blockchain both as a tool, but also in terms of stable coins. So from going as something that's almost illegal and things like that, the regulators are now saying, you know what, we're going to regulate digital assets. So now for the first time, digital assets are now part of the play in Ghana. And I think that's just so fascinating. We've had it for a long time, different conferences. From the blockchain conference from Jack Dorsey was here. And we've had lots of different African Money and DeFi Summit taking place. But now we have digital assets being legal in Ghana, regulated, and good to go. And this is everything from local innovators. And I think shout out to Eric Anan from IHQ, who's been incubating all these blockchain companies for the longest time, but also international players like Stella, who are coming in and really seeing how can we support and work with local players and really change how things are done. And now you have a lot more companies that are offering cross-border solutions, but using stable coins as the base of it. Like Kutana Pay are doing that for investments across Africa, or rather money movements across Africa, right? So now rather than going through PAPs, which can still be a bit tedious, but it's great that we have this African-dominated cross-border movement, not always going through Europe or America. But now you have stable coins allowing you to go almost instantly and for very cheap prices. So now for the first time, moving money across Africa doesn't have to be a pain. I think with that, you're going to see a lot more transactions happening, but which are being done in a regulated format and not just people moving bags of money in suitcases across borders, which is currently what's happening in the informal sector. So I think for the first time, innovators and regulators are on the same page, both seeing the benefits that technology brings and understanding that we need to work together. So I think it's a revolution in innovators and regulators working together.
As we near the end of this session, I think one of the biggest things we've seen is adaptation. The market has been reforming, people have been readjusting, innovation is taking different directions. We saw a lot of mobile apps at a certain point focused on remittance, then we saw a shift in people focusing on financial education and financial literacy. We saw reform with mobile wallets. We've seen reforms with virtual cards. We are seeing reforms around people adapting to stablecoin as a way of disrupting remittance, cheaper cost of transactions, more financial inclusion, etc. I think it is very, very clear that we can say power and advantage is never permanent in the financial markets or in the financial services industry. And as this shifts, as they shift, as systems adapt, we see a lot of resilience in the players, and we are able to somewhat see a certain pattern emerge out of it. But those who really understand the mechanics, like you guys here, who are paying attention closely to a lot of these strategic moves beneath the surface and see these adjustments happening accordingly. For example, Ben's as an economist with second stacks, you take a lot of data and insights from what is happening within the market, build models around them, and help inform what the capital markets should be doing and what direction they should be taking. From your lens, Innovation Sparks, you are reporting constantly what is really happening. And narrative is everything. Narrative is the biggest piece when it comes to driving the capital markets or driving investments into a towards a certain direction. As we look towards 2026, the question for me isn't who is the biggest today, but who really is adapting fast. Which business models, capital strategies, and market structures are best positioned for the next phase of Africa's fintech cycle? I want to hear your top three um, interesting deals, partnerships, and IPOs that happened in 2025 and why you think they were the most interesting for you. And lastly, crystal ball. What are your predictions for 2026? Isaac, you can take this and then we can hear from there to wrap.
Okay. I'm going to focus on the 2026, where things will be really interesting happening, with some signals I've seen this year already. I think, especially cross-border payments, so anything from remittance to companies expanding and working across border, is going to really fundamentally change. And this you're going to see from we talk about stable coins. So you're going to see a lot more stable coin players come in, both local African companies, and I have a company that is looking to create a Ghana denominated stable coin next year, right? So you see a lot more things like that happening. You're going to see players like telecoms enter into the space. I know MTN have been looking at this for a long time, but now imagine MTN coming in and allowing you to send money from Ghana to Nigeria from one wallet to another Momo wallet. And it's going to change just the ease of moving money across. And I think that's going to be a game changer. And I think you've also seen a lot more banks partnering with fintechs. And I can see deeper integrations with that. And that happening not just in one market, but let's say, for example, I don't know about this, but let's say an Echo Bank with a fintech and scaling it across their regions, right? So I see these deeper partnerships really integrating and changing the way we move money. But I can really see the cross-border money movement in 2026 is going to be changed from telcos, from stable coins, and the classic Web2 companies, but now with deep integrations into banks. So I think that's really going to be key. And maybe just one, I know we're talking about three, but just one last one. There's some players that have been doing a lot of work on the ground, on Afrique, Frinka, and so on, which are often behind the scenes. They're not B2C, right? They're more B2B. But I can see them further consolidating their market. And I won't be surprised if one of them is announced as the next unicorn in Africa, whether that's 2026 or 2027.
So your prediction, Honor Freak, Finkra, who's the last one?
No, I think one of them.
Oh, one of these two, likely
One of these two.
unicorn next in terms of valuation. Okay.
Money's on Honor Freak, but Frinka, I think, is a silent force.
I think Money Point is obviously established in 2025. So, but again, we look forward to seeing what that is. Good hot take. We are noting that. Ben, over to you. What's your top three prediction for 2026?
Okay, top three predictions. The one I can, speak quite clearly to is actually in-house, because at Second Stacks we're partnering with the telco, so MTN, to make mutual funds accessible to anyone with a Momo wallet. So just in that move, I think there's just a lot there, right? You're overnight, you're turning 10, 20 million people from mobile wallet users to capital markets participants. And I think that's we're obviously very excited about the move, but I do think that it speaks a lot to the type of transformation that is made possible by innovation between when there's partnerships between fintechs that are super innovative and telcos that have just this massive reach across the continent. So that's I don't know if it's much of a prediction, but it's a move I think is going to make some it's going to have quite a bit of impact in 2026. In terms of my predictions, I think, we saw the first sub-Saharan African fintech IPO down in South Africa this year, Optasia, and they went public at a $1.4 billion valuation. My prediction would be that we'll see another couple IPOs. I think once you break the seal, you kind of get rid of the taboo, and people start to have some track record that they can look at about how fintechs do on public markets on the continent. But beyond that, you have a benchmark, that starts to help folks do the comparable analysis that they need to do. So I think that's probably I don't know how hot that take is, but I do think it'll age well, because really a lot of folks just really want liquidity. There's a lot of money coming onto the continent because, like I said, there's underlying growth, there's a growing population, there's innovation, that energy is here. But I think a lot of folks are worried about the risk of being able to pull out your capital when the time comes. So being able to use the public markets for liquidity is also going to be a game changer, and I think that ramps up in 2026. And I guess my final take is just that you're going to see a lot more consolidation. So I think the entire ecosystem is going to start to move a little more smoothly. I think the regulators have actually done a pretty decent job in 2025 compared to years prior, with regards to the passporting, the licensing passports that Ghana and Rwanda were able to put together. AfTA, I think, understands the need to really ramp up the cross-border continent-wide market activity. So I just think that what we're going to see is a lot of eye-opening and folks deciding that, it's time to take the handbrake off and let the innovators grow. And not be, grow unfettered by the regulators, because up until now they've been kind of, I don't want to be too harsh, but they've been a bit overbearing, and I think that eases up in 2026.
Thank you very, very much. And I think as we wrap up today's conversation, it's one thing is very, very clear. 2025 was not a year of headline hype. We've seen a lot of substance. We've seen structural signals. We've seen rebounds of capital markets, like Ghana experiencing about what was it? I think we saw Ghana experience about 76% market growth year to date as of October's report. We've seen a massive turnover in Nigeria's public markets as well. We've seen big stimulations in Johannesburg Stock Exchange. I think there were 3 big IPOs that happened in Joburg. And I think that's starting to build a lot of confidence. We've seen one of the big fintechs, Cashpla's IPO on the Casablanca Stock Exchange. We've seen .com in Zambia also listed on the stock exchange. And I'm very excited. I'm very, very, very excited about what 2026 is going to look like. And for me, capital has become more selective, partnerships more strategic, and the market participation more intentional. We saw not only in the fintech space deals, but also across financial services and capital markets landscape. We've seen announcements from global players like Revolut and PayPal signaling deeper engagements in Africa. I think they are really far behind schedule. Let's see how the existing competitors in the market react to these announcements and how they reposition themselves to protect their market shares and increase their market share. We've also seen capital market events such as Dangote Refinery on track to IPO in 2026. We've seen corporate moves like MTN Mobile Money Uganda carving out of its group of businesses and about to IPO as well in Uganda. So if you missed the MTN IPO in Ghana, this is your opportunity to really own a share, a piece of MTN. For those who do not know who MTN Group is in Africa and are joining from across the world, MTN Group is one of the largest telecommunications and boldly mobile financial services innovators on the continent. And they are quickly, they consolidated last year through their new strategy, closing some of their countries of operations and starting to double down their investments. And I call it managed separation within their group of businesses to ensure that there's independence. Each of the verticals that are generating revenue for them are fully protected and hedged against the other in case of any regulatory limitations, and clearly defining the roles of each sub entity within the group to be able to fully function under a clear jurisdiction. And I think that was a very smart move to do in terms of separating their mobile money services from the telco business, hence two clear regulators with different oversights, and allows faster innovation. Africa is no longer viewed purely as a frontier of growth, but as a market where there's skill, governance, and long-term capital. And I think governance alone is a big signal for investors to feel comfortable and understand what the end means. And for me, the other big signal is the influence of liquidity, regulation, and infrastructure investments, making it more comfortable for investors to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And for me, capital markets regaining and rebounding this year has been a strong signal that there are opportunities for exit in Africa. You don't need to go and exit in New York Stock Exchange or London Stock Exchange. You can exit, you can IPO in African capital markets, in African stock exchanges. And for me, this is a platform where I love to encourage and see more innovators, more business owners, more institutional investors start to look at how do we fully stimulate the local stock exchanges to be ready to, or to be attractive enough for local IPOs to happen, and also allow local citizens to participate in some of these opportunities. Thank you once again, Isaac. Thank you very much, Ben, for joining us in today's conversation as the beginning of the series. Tomorrow, we continue with the Fintech Replay 2025 with a focus on product innovation, regulation, and ecosystem shifts. We'll be joined by Daniel Kagame, who is the CEO of Credify Africa, and John Egu, who is the CEO of AutoCheck Africa Financial Services, to unpack how fintech products are being built, regulated, and scaled in today's environment, and what it means for the next phase of the ecosystem. It's going to be same time tomorrow, 10 a.m. EST, 3 p.m. GMT, 6 p.m. EAT, and it's live on YouTube and LinkedIn. Stay tuned and share your comments in the comment section. We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions and your predictions as well on what 2026 is going to look like in Africa. So thank you, guys. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Foster.
Yeah,
Looking
cheers.
forward to tomorrow.